Jake Harrison had everything: land, success, and the respect of his town. But when he finds a lost, terrified little girl on his farm, his world changes forever. Who is she running from? And why does she fear the man claiming to be her father? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jake Harrison wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed his vast farmland. At 45, he owned the most successful farm in Willow Creek, with fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The afternoon sun beat down on his tanned skin, highlighting the creases around his eyes that had deepened over the years. "Of hard work. Mr. Harrison, the new irrigation system is all set up in the east field," called out Tom, his farm manager. Jake nodded. "Good. Let's see if it improves the yield this season." Everything in his life was about improvement, expansion, and success. After inheriting a modest family farm 20 years ago, Jake had turned it into an agricultural empire. His organic produce supplied supermarkets across 3 states. He had money, land, and respect in the community, but he had no one to share it with. Jake climbed into his pickup truck and drove along the dirt road that bordered his property. His large farmhouse waited at the end of the lane, beautiful, immaculate, and empty. Since his divorce 10 years ago, Jake had thrown himself into his work. His ex-wife had wanted city life and complained that he was married to the farm more than to her. She hadn't been wrong. As he rounded the curve near the creek that marked his property line, something caught his eye, a flash of movement in the tall grass. Jake slowed the truck, squinting through the dust-covered windshield. There, standing barefoot at the edge of his cornfield, was a small girl. Jake stopped the truck and stepped out cautiously. The child looked about 7 or 8 years old, with tangled brown hair. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her face smudged with dirt. When she saw him approaching, her eyes widened with fear. "Hey there," Jake said softly, kneeling down to appear less intimidating. "Are you lost?" The little girl didn't answer. She just stared at him with large, frightened eyes. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," Jake continued, keeping his distance. "What's your name? Where are your parents?" The girl's bottom lip trembled, but still, she remained silent. Jake noticed scratches on her arms and legs, as if she'd been walking through brush for a long time. Her feet were dirty and had small cuts on them. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked. At this, the girl gave a small nod. "Well, I've got some food back at my house. Would you like to come with me and get something to eat? Then we can figure out where you belong." So after a moment's hesitation, the girl took a tentative step toward him. Jake smiled reassuringly and slowly stood up, careful not to make any sudden movements. "My truck's right over there." "It's not far." The girl followed him, keeping a safe distance. When they reached the truck, Jake opened the passenger door for her, but she just stared at it. "It's okay," he said. "You can sit inside." Eventually she climbed in, her movements stiff and cautious. Jake closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his mind racing. Where had this child come from? The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and they didn't have young children. Had she wandered away from a family picnicking by the creek? But why was she alone and in such a state? As he drove toward his house, Jake glanced at the silent child beside him. "I'm Jake," he said. "Jake Harrison. This is my farm you were on." The E. Girl stared straight ahead, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. "Can you tell me your name?" Jake tried again. No response. Jake pulled up to his farmhouse, a beautiful 2-story white structure with a wide front porch. He helped the girl out of the truck and led her inside. The cool air from the air conditioning seemed to surprise her, and she looked around the spacious kitchen with wide eyes. "Let's get you something to eat first," Jake said, opening his refrigerator. He made a simple sandwich with turkey and cheese, cut it into triangles, and placed it in front of her at the kitchen table along with a glass of milk. The girl stared at the food for a moment, then began to eat quickly, as if afraid someone might take it away. "Slow down," Jake said gently. "There's plenty more if you're still hungry." While she ate, Jake called the local police department. "Sheriff Davis, it's Jake Harrison. I found a young girl on my property. She appears to be lost." "No, she hasn't said anything. Won't even tell me her name." "Yes, she seems unharmed, just scared and hungry." "Okay, I'll keep her here until you arrive." Jake hung up and turned back to the girl, who had finished her sandwich and was watching him warily. "The sheriff is coming to help find your family," Jake explained. "Do you understand?" The girl's eyes filled with sudden fear and she shook her head vigorously. "No? You don't want the sheriff to come?" Jake asked, confused. She shook her head again, more frantically this time. "Are you afraid of something? Or someone?" A small nod. Jake felt a protective instinct rise within him. "Did someone hurt you?" The girl didn't respond directly, but tears welled up in her eyes. "It's okay," Jake said quickly. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." An hour later, Sheriff Davis arrived. He was a middle-aged man with a kind face who had known Jake for years. "She still hasn't spoken?" the sheriff asked after Jake led him into the living room where the girl sat, her knees pulled up to her chest. "Not a word," Jake replied, "but she's clearly afraid of something." The sheriff approached her slowly and knelt down. "Hello there. I'm Sheriff Davis. Can you tell me your name?" The girl pressed herself further into the couch, her eyes darting between the sheriff and Jake. "It's okay," the sheriff said. "We just want to help you get back to your family. They must be very worried about you." At the mention of family, the girl's expression changed from fear to what looked like despair. After several failed attempts to get her to speak, the sheriff stood up with a sigh. "I'll put out a missing child report. Someone must be looking for her. In the meantime, she can stay here," Jake said, surprising himself. The sheriff raised his eyebrows. "Jake, there are protocols for this sort of thing. She should go to social services." "Just for tonight," Jake insisted. "She's terrified, Bill. Moving her again might make things worse. I've got a spare bedroom. Let her get a good night's sleep. Clean up and maybe by morning she'll be ready to talk." Sheriff Davis hesitated. "I don't know, Jake. You don't have experience with children." "I've got common sense," Jake replied. "And right now, my gut tells me she needs stability. Not more strangers." After further discussion, the sheriff reluctantly agreed, but only after making Jake promise to bring the girl to the station first thing in the morning if she still wasn't talking. After the sheriff left, Jake showed the girl to the bathroom and gave her one of his t-shirts to wear after her bath. The shirt hung on her like a dress. "I'll be right outside if you need anything," he told her. "Just call or knock on the door." While she bathed, Jake prepared the guest bedroom, his mind whirling with questions. Who was this child? What had happened to make her so afraid? And why did he feel such a strong need to protect her? That night, after settling the girl into bed, Jake sat in his home office making calls to neighbors, asking if anyone had heard about a missing child. No one had. He was about to go to bed when he heard a small sound. The girl stood in the doorway of his office, tears streaming down her face. "Hey, what's wrong?" Jake asked, quickly crossing to her. To his surprise, she reached out her arms to him. Instinctively, Jake picked her up, and she buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. "It's okay," he whispered, patting her back awkwardly. "You're safe now." As he held her, something shifted in Jake's heart. This lost, frightened child had awakened a protective instinct he never knew he had. The next morning, the girl still wasn't speaking, but she seemed less afraid. She followed Jake around as he made breakfast, watching his every move. When Sheriff Davis called to ask about bringing her in, Jake found himself reluctant. "Give me a few more days, Bill," he requested. "Fativa, she's just starting to trust me." "Jake, we need to find her family." I know, but she's traumatized. Something bad happened to her, and pushing her might make it worse. Let me try to get through to her first." Against his better judgment, Sheriff Davis agreed to give Jake 1 week. The days that followed established a new routine for Jake. He showed the girl around the farm, introduced her to the animals, and took her with him on his daily rounds. He had to hire someone to stay with her when he needed to work, but he found himself cutting his hours to spend more time with her. On the 4th day, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jake had an idea. "You know," he said casually, "I need to call you something. Since you won't tell me your name, how about I give you one? Just temporarily." The girl looked at him curiously. Jake pointed to the rosebush beside the porch, its blooms bright and vibrant in the evening light. "How about Rose? Would that be okay?" To his delight, the girl gave a small nod and something that almost looked like a smile. "Rose it is then," Jake said, feeling oddly pleased. That night, as he tucked her into bed, Rose spoke for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft Jake almost missed it. Jake's heart swelled. "You're welcome, Rose. Get some sleep now." As the days turned into weeks, Rose began to speak more, though she never mentioned her past or where she had come from. Jake had regular check-ins with Sheriff Davis and social services, but with no reports of a missing child matching Rose's description, they were at a standstill. "We need to think about a more permanent solution," the social worker, Mrs. Chen, told Jake during one of her visits. "Foster care, perhaps, until we can determine her origins." The thought of Rose going to strangers made Jake's stomach clench. What if I were to foster her?" he asked hesitantly. Mrs. Chen looked surprised. "You? Mr. Harrison, fostering is a serious commitment, and you're a single man with a demanding business." "I can adjust my schedule," Jake said firmly. "I have good people working for me, and Rose is comfortable here. She's starting to thrive." And it was true. The frightened, silent child was slowly transforming. She helped Jake collect eggs from the chicken coop each morning, giggling when the hens clucked at her. She sat beside him on the tractor, her eyes wide with wonder as they traversed the fields. She even started to make friends with the daughter of one of Jake's workers. Mrs. Chen remained skeptical, but agreed to begin the process of temporary guardianship while they continued to search for Rose's family. 6 months passed, and Rose became a fixture in Jake's life. He enrolled her in the local school, where she was quiet but did well. He learned her favorite foods, macaroni and cheese, strawberries, her fears, thunderstorms, the dark, and her joys, animals of all kinds, drawing. He built her a tree house in the old oak behind the farmhouse and taught her to ride a pony. In return, Rose filled a void in Jake's life he hadn't even realized was there. His house was no longer empty and silent, but filled with a child's laughter and questions. His days had new purpose beyond work and profit. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing, Rose leaning against him as they watched fireflies dance in the twilight, Jake realized with sudden clarity, he loved this child as if she were his own. "Jake," Rose said softly, interrupting his thoughts, "am I going to stay with you forever?" Jake looked down at her upturned face, so trusting and hopeful. "Would you like that, Rosie?" She nodded emphatically. "Yes, you're my family now." Jake's throat tightened with emotion. "I'd like that too, sweetheart, very much." The next day, Jake contacted his lawyer about formally adopting Rose. The process would be complicated without knowing her background, but Jake was determined. Rose was his daughter in all the ways that mattered, and he would make it official. Life settled into a sweet rhythm that Jake never could have imagined 2 years earlier. Rose was now 9. They had estimated her age with the help of a doctor, thriving in school and blossoming into a confident, happy child. Sometimes Jake would catch a shadow crossing her face, a distant look in her eyes that hinted at memories she still wouldn't share. But those moments grew rarer. Then came the day that changed everything. Jake was in town at the feed store when he overheard 2 women talking. "Did you see that fancy car at the diner?" Some city reporter asking questions all over town. "What about?" "Missing children, they say. Specifically, a little girl who disappeared about 2 years ago. Daughter of some super-rich family up north. There's a massive reward for information." Jake's heart began to pound. 2 years ago. The timeline matched when he'd found Rose. "What's the reporter's name?" he asked, interrupting the women. They looked startled, but one answered, "Elena something. Pretty lady, dark hair, staying at the Willow Creek Inn." Jake thanked them and hurried out, his mind racing. Could Rose be this missing, wealthy child? It would explain her fear, her reluctance to speak about her past. But if she was, what did that mean for their future together? He drove to the inn, determined to meet this reporter before she could disrupt the life he and Rose had built. The receptionist directed him to the diner across the street, where Elena was reportedly conducting interviews. Jake entered the small-town diner, scanning the booths until he spotted a woman sitting alone, a notebook open in front of her. She had glossy dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a determined set to her jaw. Taking a deep breath, Jake approached her table. "Excuse me, are you Elena, the reporter looking into a missing child case?" The woman looked up, her expression guarded but curious. Yes, I'm Elena Morales, and you are? Jake Harrison, he replied, sliding into the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. I think we need to talk. Elena studied him with those perceptive eyes. About what, Mr. Harrison? Jake leaned forward, his voice low and intense. About a little girl who was found wandering alone near my farm 2 years ago. A little girl with no name and no past who's now my daughter. Eleanor's eyes widened, and she quickly closed her notebook. Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice equally, quiet but vibrating with intensity, I think you may be right. We definitely need to talk. As their eyes locked across the table, Jake knew that his and Rose's peaceful life was about to be upended. But he had no idea just how much danger was now heading their way, or that this determined reporter would soon become his unexpected ally in the fight to protect the child they both wanted to save. Elena Morales had been chasing this story for over a year. As an investigative journalist for the Eastern Tribune, she'd built her reputation on uncovering the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried. But the disappearance of Sophia Blackwood, the 7-year-old heiress to the Blackwood fortune, had become more than just another assignment. It had become almost an obsession. Now, sitting across from Jake Harrison in the small-town diner, Eleanor felt her heart racing. Could this finally be the break she'd been searching for? Tell me everything, she said, pulling out her recorder. From the beginning. Jake shook his head, placing his hand over the device. Not here, and not with that. This isn't an interview, Miss Morales. This is me making sure you don't show up at my farm and upset my daughter. Eleanor studied the man before her. His weathered face showed the lines of someone who worked outdoors, but his eyes held a fierce protectiveness that made her reconsider her approach. Fair enough, she said, putting the recorder away. Where would you like to talk? My farm. This afternoon. You can see Rose for yourself, but from a distance. I don't want her knowing about any of this until I understand what's going on. Eleanor nodded. I'll be there. What's the address? After getting directions, Eleanor watched Jake leave, her mind whirling with possibilities. The timing matched. The age was right. And there had been whispers that Sophia Blackwood hadn't simply wandered off, as the official story claimed. Later that day, Eleanor drove down the long dirt road leading to Harrison Farms. The property was even more impressive than the locals had described. Hundreds of acres of perfectly maintained fields, modern equipment, and a beautiful farmhouse that managed to be both rustic and elegant. Jake was waiting on the porch when she arrived. He led her to a side area, where they could talk privately but still see the backyard, where a little girl was playing with a golden retriever puppy. That's Rose, Jake said, his voice softening as he watched the child throw a ball for the excited dog. Elena felt her breath catch. Even from a distance, the resemblance was striking, the same heart-shaped face and delicate features as the photos of Sophia Blackwood that had been splashed across newspapers and websites for the past 2 years. How did you find her? Elena asked quietly. Jake told her everything, discovering Rose near the creek, her initial silence, how she'd gradually become a part of his life. As he spoke, Elena noticed the tenderness in his voice, the genuine love this tough farmer had for the child he'd taken in. She never talks about her past, Jake finished. Whenever I've tried to ask, she either changes the subject or shuts down completely. The police searched, but no one ever reported a missing child matching her description. No one locally, Elena clarified, but the Blackwoods live in Westridge, almost 500 miles from here. Jake frowned. How would a 7-year-old travel 500 miles alone? That's the question, isn't it? Elena replied. The official story is that Sophia wandered away from the family's summer estate during a garden party, but I've never believed that. There were too many security measures, too many staff members watching, and the Blackwoods' behavior afterward was strange. Strange how? Victor Blackwood, Sophia's father, offered a massive reward initially, but when the police investigation stalled, he seemed almost relieved. His wife, Isabel, had a complete breakdown and was hospitalized. There were rumors of marital problems, business troubles. Jake's expression darkened. You think her own parents had something to do with her disappearance? I don't know, Elena admitted. But Victor Blackwood has powerful enemies. His business practices are ruthless. Some people think it might have been a kidnapping gone wrong. If that's true, Jake said slowly, then whoever took her might still be looking for her. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. If Rose was really Sophia Blackwood, she might still be in danger. I need to know for sure, Elena said. Do you have any pictures of her? Jake hesitated, then pulled out his phone. He showed Elena several photos of Rose, riding her pony, sitting on a tractor with Jake, blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Elena compared them with the photos of Sophia Blackwood on her own phone. The resemblance was undeniable. There's a way to know for certain, Elena said. The Blackwoods had Sophia's DNA profile on file, standard procedure for wealthy families concerned. About kidnapping, one strand of hair would be enough to compare. Jake's jaw tightened. You want me to take DNA from my daughter without her knowledge? That feels wrong. What feels more wrong, Elena challenged, taking a strand of hair or keeping her from her real family if the Blackwoods are innocent in all this? Their conversation was interrupted by Rose's cheerful voice calling from the yard. Jake, look what Buddy can do now. Jake smiled automatically, turning to watch as the puppy performed an unsteady sit on command. Good job, Rosie, and good boy, Buddy. The child beamed with pride, her whole face lighting up as she looked at Jake with absolute trust and adoration. Elena felt a pang in her heart. The bond between them was real and deep. If Rose was Sophia Blackwood, returning her to her biological family would devastate both the child and this man who so clearly loved her. I'll think about the DNA test, Jake said quietly as Rose returned to playing. But I need to know everything you've uncovered about the Blackwoods and why Sophia disappeared. No reporter tricks, no holding back information. If my daughter is in danger, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. The way he said "we" didn't escape Elena's notice. He was including her in whatever came next. Deal, she agreed. But I'll need your complete honesty too. Anything Rose has mentioned, any strangers who've shown unusual interest in her, it could all be important. As evening approached, Jake invited Elena to stay for dinner. Rose should meet you, he explained. If you're going to be around asking questions, better she thinks you're just a friend rather than getting suspicious. Elena agreed, though she felt a twinge of guilt at the deception. But meeting Rose up close might give her more insights. Rose was initially shy around Elena, studying her with curious eyes as they sat around the kitchen table. But when Elena mentioned she'd once worked on a horse farm during college, Rose's reserve melted away. We have horses too, she exclaimed. My pony's named Star because she has a white star on her forehead. Do you want to see her tomorrow? I'd love to, Elena replied, smiling at the child's enthusiasm. Throughout dinner, Elena watched Rose carefully. The girl's mannerisms, her way of speaking, they were consistent with the privileged upbringing Sophia Blackwood would have had, but softened by 2 years of farm life. When Rose mentioned that thunderstorms scared her, Elena remembered reading that Sophia Blackwood had developed a fear of storms after getting caught in one during a family vacation. After dinner, Jake sent Rose upstairs to get ready for bed. Once she was out of earshot, Elena turned to him. She's Sophia Blackwood, I'm almost certain of it. Jake sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I was afraid you'd say that. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, What happens now? That depends, Elena said. If the Blackwoods weren't involved in her disappearance legally, they have the right to get their daughter back. Jake's face paled. And if they were involved? Then we need proof, Elena replied. Enough evidence to keep Rose safe with you. Jake nodded slowly. I'll get the DNA sample, but I want to be present for any test, and I want to know the results before anyone else. Of course, Elena agreed. I know a private lab that can be discreet. As they cleared the dinner dishes together, Elena found herself studying Jake. His hands were strong and calloused from farm work, but gentle as he handled Rose's favorite cup. There was an integrity about him that Elena found refreshing after years of dealing with deceptive sources and corrupt officials. You're good with her, Elena observed. How did a confirmed bachelor like you figure out how to raise a little girl? Jake smiled ruefully. Lots of mistakes, but Rose is pretty forgiving. And there's Martha, my housekeeper. She comes in 3 times a week and has grandkids of her own. She's been a godsend with the girl stuff. The whole town must have noticed when you suddenly had a child living with you. Small towns run on gossip, but they also protect their own, Jake explained. Once they saw how much Rose and I needed each other, people closed ranks around us. No one asks too many questions. Eleanor could see how that might be true. In just one evening, she'd witnessed the deep bond between Jake and Rose. The way the child looked to him for reassurance, the gentle way he tucked her hair behind her ear, these weren't things that could be faked. After Rose was in bed, Jake and Elena sat on the porch with cups of coffee, the night air cool around them. "Tell me more about the Blackwoods," Jake said, his voice low. Elena shared what she knew. Victor Blackwood had built a technology empire from nothing, known for buying struggling companies, stripping their assets, and discarding the remains. Isabel came from old money, a socialite known more for her charity galas than any personal accomplishments. Their marriage had been showing signs of strain even before Sophia's disappearance. "The strange thing," Elena continued, "is how quickly Victor returned to work after Sophia vanished. Within a month he was back to his usual schedule, making deals, attending business functions. Isabel, meanwhile, retreated from public life completely. Maybe that was his way of coping, Jake suggested. Elena shrugged. Maybe, but about a year ago I interviewed their former head of security, a man named Dominic Reeves. He'd been fired shortly after Sophia disappeared, supposedly for negligence. He told me something odd, that Victor had dismissed half the security team the week before the disappearance, said it was budget cuts. Budget cuts? For a billionaire? Exactly. And the remaining security was assigned to the main house, leaving Sar, the garden area where Sophia was playing, less protected. Jake frowned. That does sound suspicious. There's more, Eleanor said, leaning forward. Reeves claimed that he overheard Victor arguing with someone on the phone the day before Sophia disappeared. Something about paying what was owed and finding another way to settle the debt. You think someone took Sophia to force Victor to pay some kind of debt? Jake asked, horrified. It's a theory, but if that's true, why didn't they demand a ransom? And how did Rose end up wandering alone near your farm, hundreds of miles away? Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching the fireflies blink in the darkness. We need to know who took her and why. Until we do, Rose isn't safe, not with me, not with the Blackwoods, not anywhere. Elena nodded. I agree, but we need to be careful. If Victor Blackwood is involved, he's a dangerous enemy to make. And if he's not, if he's just a father who lost his daughter, then we need to be prepared for what that means for you and Rose. The possibility hung heavy between them. Jake might have to give up the child he'd come to love as his daughter. I won't let anyone hurt her, Jake said firmly, no matter who her real father is. The conviction in his voice stirred something in Eleanor. In her line of work, she met plenty of people with agendas, with angles they were working. Jake Harrison wasn't one of them. He was simply a man who loved his daughter and would do anything to protect her. I believe you, Elena said softly. Their eyes met in the dim porch light, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went beyond their shared concern for Rose. The moment was broken by the ringing of Eleanor's phone. She checked the screen. I don't recognize this number, she answered, her expression changing as she listened. Yes. No, I don't have a comment at this time. Who told you I was here and I see? No, as I said, no comment. She hung up, her face pale. That was another reporter. Someone tipped them off that I'm in Willow Creek investigating the Blackwood case. How would anyone know that? Jake asked. Alarmed. I've been asking questions all over town, Elena admitted, but I've been discreet, never mentioning the Blackwoods specifically. She looked troubled. This doesn't feel right. I think someone's watching me. You should stay here tonight, Jake said immediately. We have plenty of room, and if someone is following you, I don't like the idea of you alone at that inn. Elena hesitated. I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition. It's safer. And we can talk more about our next steps in the morning. In the end, Elena agreed. Jake showed her to the guest room, bringing her a towel and extra blanket. Thank you, she said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Not just for this, but for trusting me with Rose's story. Jake studied her, his expression unreadable. I'm not sure I had much choice. But for what it's worth, I think you're one of the good ones, Elena Morales. The compliment shouldn't have made her cheeks warm, but it did. I try to be, she replied. After Jake left, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her reporter's instincts on high alert. Someone knew she was close to finding Sophia Blackwood. Someone didn't want this story told. Meanwhile, Jake checked on Rose one last time before heading to bed. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in one arm. Jake gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his heart aching at the thought of losing her. "I'll keep you safe, Rosie," he whispered. "I promise." In the morning, Eleanor woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She found Jake in the kitchen, already dressed in work clothes, preparing breakfast. "Rose still asleep?" she asked, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "She's an early riser usually, but she was up late last night reading under the covers with a flashlight," Jake said with a fond smile. "I'm letting her sleep in." Elena watched him move around the kitchen with easy familiarity. There was something undeniably attractive about this man who could run a massive farm business and still take the time to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes for his daughter. Their peaceful morning was shattered by the sound of tires on gravel outside. Jake looked out the window, his body tensing. "Black SUV," he said tersely. "Tinted windows, not from around here." Elena joined him at the window. The vehicle had parked at the end of the driveway, and two men in suits were getting out. "They don't look like reporters," she said, a chill running down her spine. "No," Jake agreed grimly. "They don't." Before they could decide what to do, Rose appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Jake, who's outside?" Jake and Elena exchanged a worried glance. The little girl followed their gaze to the window, and her reaction was immediate and terrifying. All color drained from her face, and she let out a small choked sound of pure fear. "Rose!" Jake moved quickly to her side, kneeling down. "Honey, what's wrong?" Rose was trembling violently, her eyes huge with terror. "The bad men," she whispered. "They found me." Jake gathered her into his arms, looking over her head at Elena with alarm. "What bad men, Rosie? Do you know them?" Rose buried her face against his shoulder, her small body shaking. "They took me from the garden," she whispered. "They said if I told anyone, they'd hurt my mommy." Elena's heart raced. For the first time since her disappearance, Sophia Blackwood, Rose, was revealing what had happened to her. And if she recognized the men outside, it meant her kidnappers had found her again. "Jake," Eleanor said urgently, "we need to get her out of here. Now." Jake didn't hesitate. He scooped Rose up in his arms and headed for the back door. "My truck's in the barn. We can go out the back way." "Where will we go?" Elena asked, grabbing her purse and following him. "I know a place," Jake said. "An old hunting cabin that belonged to my father. It's deep in the woods, hard to find if you don't know." "It's there." As they slipped out the back door, the sound of knocking came from the front of the house. Heavy, insistent knocking that quickly turned to pounding. "They're coming in," Elena whispered. Jake handed Rose to her. "Take her to the barn. The blue truck keys are inside. I'll create a distraction." "Jake, no," Elena began, but he cut her off. "I'll be right behind you. Go. Keep her safe." Eleanor hesitated only a moment before carrying the terrified child toward the barn. Behind her, she heard Jake's voice, loud and confrontational. "Can I help you, gentlemen? You're trespassing on private property." As Elena settled Rose in the truck, she prayed Jake would be okay. She wasn't a religious woman, but in that moment she found herself making deals with any higher power that might be listening. "Keep him safe. Let him join us. Don't let me be responsible for anything happening to him." Looking down at the frightened child beside her, Elena made a silent vow. She would protect Rose, uncover the truth, and make sure those responsible paid for their crimes. And somehow, she would find a way to keep this makeshift family together, because in just one day, she'd seen how much Jake and Rose needed each other. And if she was being honest with herself, Eleanor was starting to need them too. The sound of shouting came from the direction of the house, followed by what might have been a gunshot. Rose whimpered and Elena pulled her close. "It's going to be okay," she promised, even as her own heart pounded with fear. "Your dad will be here any minute." And in that moment of crisis, Elena realized she hadn't even thought twice about referring to Jake as Rose's dad. Because whatever a DNA test might prove, in all the ways that truly mattered, that's exactly what he was. Elena's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as she navigated the truck down a narrow dirt road. Beside her, Rose sat trembling, her small face tear-stained but surprisingly composed for a child her age. "Where's Jake?" Rose asked for the third time. "Why isn't he here yet?" "He'll come," Elena reassured her, though her own stomach was twisted with worry. It had been 20 minutes since they'd fled the farm. 20 minutes with no sign of Jake. "The bad men might hurt him," Rose whispered. Elena reached over to squeeze the little girl's hand. "You're Dee. Jake is strong and smart. He knows how to take care of himself." Following Jake's hurried directions, Elena turned onto an even narrower path that barely qualified as a road. Tree branches scraped against the truck as they pushed deeper into the forest. "Almost there," Elena murmured, more to herself than to Rose. The cabin, Jake had told her, was just beyond the creek crossing. The truck splashed through the shallow water. Elena's phone rang. She grabbed it eagerly, hoping it was Jake. "Elena Morales," she answered. "Ms. Morales." The voice was unfamiliar, male, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "I believe you have something that belongs to my employer." Elena's blood ran cold. She glanced at Rose, who was staring out the window, unaware of the conversation. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elena said evenly. "The child, Ms. Morales, Sophia Blackwood, or Rose as she's known these days." The man's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "My employer would very much like her returned." "Who is your employer?" Elena demanded, her reporter's instincts kicking in despite her fear, a soft chuckle. "Someone who doesn't appreciate loose ends, someone who has invested a great deal of money in this situation. If you're talking about Victor Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood is merely a player in a larger game," the man interrupted. "A game you would be wise to avoid. Bring the child to the Westridge Hotel tomorrow at noon, room 714. Come alone, and this ends peacefully. And if I don't, then the farmer pays the price. We have him, you see." Elena's heart stuttered. "Let me speak to him." "That's not possible at the moment. He's rather indisposed." "I don't believe you," Elena said, though fear gripped her chest. "Check your messages in 1 minute." "And Ms. Morales?" "Don't involve the police. We'll know if you do." The call ended. Elena pulled the truck to a stop in front of a rustic log cabin, nestled among tall pines. Her phone pinged with a new message. Hands shaking, she opened it to find a photo of Jake, slumped in what looked like the back of a van, a trickle of blood, running from his temple. "No," she whispered, her throat tight with sudden tears. "Is that Jake?" Rose asked, peering at the phone. "Is he hurt?" Elena quickly locked the screen. "No, honey, it's nothing," she forced a smile. "Let's get inside the cabin." The cabin was basic but clean, clearly maintained despite infrequent use. A main room with a stone fireplace, small kitchen area, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom with a shower that produced only cold water. Elena found blankets in a cedar chest and made up beds for herself and Rose. "I'm scared," Rose admitted, as Elena tucked her in for a short nap. The emotional morning had exhausted the child. "I know," Elena said gently, "but I'm going to keep you safe, I promise." "The bad men said that too," Rose said quietly. "They said they were taking me somewhere safe, but they weren't." Elena sat on the edge of the bed. "Can you tell me about them, Rose? About the day they took you?" Rose clutched her blanket tighter. "I was playing in the garden. Mommy was having a party with lots of people. The man came and said Daddy wanted to see me. He had a badge like the security guards, so I went with him. What happened then? He took me to a van. Another man was there. They put something over my mouth that smelled funny. When I woke up, we were driving for a long time." Rose's voice trembled. "They were mad at each other. The first man kept saying they were supposed to scare my daddy, not take me. The other man said plans had changed." Elena's mind raced. This wasn't sounding like a standard kidnapping for ransom. "Did they say anything about why they took you?" she asked gently. Rose nodded. "They said Daddy wouldn't pay what he owed, so now he had to pay with me." Her lower lip quivered. "Did my daddy give me away, Miss Elena?" The innocent question broke Elena's heart. "No, sweetheart. I'm sure your father loved you very much. These We're bad men who did a bad thing. Then why didn't he find me? Rose asked, her eyes filling with tears. Elena had no good answer for that. I don't know, honey, but we're going to figure everything out. Once Rose had fallen asleep, Elena paced the small cabin, trying to make sense of it all. The photo of Jake haunted her. Was he really injured, or was it staged to manipulate her? And who was behind all this, if not Victor Blackwood? She needed more information. Pulling out her laptop, Elena connected to her mobile hotspot and began researching Victor Blackwood's business dealings from around the time of Sophia's disappearance. Several hours and many news articles later, a pattern emerged. In the months before Sophia vanished, Blackwood Industries had been negotiating a hostile takeover of a company called Meridian Technologies. The owner, Gabriel Meridian, had fought the takeover viciously, but eventually lost. 1 month after gaining control, Blackwood had stripped Meridian Technologies of its assets and laid off all 300 employees. Gabriel Meridian had publicly vowed revenge, then disappeared from public view. 3 weeks later, Sophia Blackwood vanished. From her family's garden, Gabriel Meridian, Elena murmured. Could he be the mysterious employer behind Rose's kidnapping? A noise outside startled her. Elena grabbed a heavy flashlight, the only potential weapon she could find, and moved to the window. A figure was approaching through the trees. Jake, she gasped, recognizing his broad shoulders and distinctive gait. Elena ran to the door, relief flooding through her, but caution made her pause before opening it. Who's there? She called. It's me, Jake's voice answered. Elena, let me in. Still she hesitated. What's the name of Rose's pony? A moment of silence, then, Star, because of the white star on her forehead. Elena flung open the door. Jake stood there, a bruise, darkening on his cheekbone, his clothes dirty and torn, but very much alive. Thank God, Elena breathed, surprising herself by throwing her arms around him. Jake stiffened for a moment, then returned the embrace, his strong arms pulling her close. They stood like that longer than necessary, the relief of finding each other safe, creating an intimacy neither had expected. When they finally separated, Elena noticed the wince Jake couldn't quite hide. You're hurt, she said, ushering him inside. I'll live, Jake replied grimly. Those men were professionals. They knew exactly what they were doing. How did you get away? Elena asked, leading him to the couch. Jake sat down heavily. They weren't as careful as they should have been. Thought a farmer wouldn't be much trouble. A grim smile crossed his face. They didn't know I served 8 years in the army before coming home to take over the farm. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. You were in the military? Special Forces, Jake confirmed. Seems those skills haven't completely disappeared. Eleanor took a deep breath. They called me the men. They sent me a picture of you unconscious. Jake's expression turned serious. When was this? Just after we arrived at the cabin. They want me to bring Rose to the Westridge Hotel tomorrow at noon. That's not happening, Jake stated flatly. Of course not, Elena agreed. But Jake, I think I know who's behind this. Have you ever heard of Gabriel Meridian? Jake frowned. Name doesn't ring a bell. Elena explained her theory about Meridian seeking revenge on Victor Blackwood by kidnapping his daughter. But something must have gone wrong with the original plan. Instead of holding her for ransom, they ended up abandoning her near your farm. Or maybe they never intended to demand a ransom, Jake suggested. Maybe taking Sophia was the revenge itself, making Blackwood suffer the way Meridian suffered when he lost his company. But why come back for her now after 2 years? Jake's expression darkened. Because you started asking questions. Your investigation must have stirred things up, made them worry their secret would be exposed. The accusation stung, though Eleanor knew it wasn't meant as a personal attack. I didn't know, she said quietly. I was just trying to uncover the truth. Jake's face softened. I know, and the truth still matters, but right now Rose's safety matters more. As if summoned by her name, Rose appeared in the bedroom doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. When she saw Jake, her face lit up. Jake, she cried, running to him. You're okay. Jake winced as Rose collided with him, but he hugged her tightly. Of course I am, Rosie. Did you think some city slickers in fancy suits could keep me away from my girl? Rose giggled, the sound brightening, the tense atmosphere of the cabin. "You're all dirty," she observed. "Yeah, well, I had to take a shortcut through some brambles," Jake said, his tone deliberately light. "Think I need a shower." While Jake cleaned up, Eleanor made a simple dinner from the supplies they'd hastily grabbed from the farm. Rose helped, set the table, seemingly recovered from the morning's terror now that Jake was with them. Watching the little girl arrange forks with careful precision, Elena marveled at children's resilience. Rose had endured more trauma in her short life than most adults, yet here she was, humming as she folded paper towels into makeshift napkins. Jake emerged from the bathroom, his hair damp, wearing fresh clothes he'd apparently kept at the cabin. The bruise on his face looked worse, but he moved with less stiffness. "Something smells good," he said, smiling at Elena. "Just beans and hot dogs," Elena replied. "Not exactly gourmet." "It's my favorite," Rose declared, climbing onto her chair. They ate. They carefully kept the conversation light for Rose's sake. Jake told funny stories about farm animals that had Rose giggling uncontrollably. Helena shared tales of her more unusual reporting assignments, like covering a competitive pumpkin growing contest, or interviewing a 105-year-old woman who claimed the secret to longevity was eating a spoonful of dirt each day. It was almost possible to forget the danger that had driven them to this remote cabin. Almost. After dinner, Jake suggested Rose might like to look for fireflies outside. The cabin clearing was safe enough, and he could watch her from the porch while he and Eleanor talked privately. As Rose darted around the darkening yard with a jar, Jake and Elena sat side by side on the cabin's small porch. "What's our next move?" Elena asked quietly. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "We need proof of who's behind this. Not just theories, but evidence that would stand up in court. Otherwise, even if we keep Rose safe now, they'll just keep coming." "I've been thinking about that," Eleanor said. "There's a cybersecurity expert I've worked with before. He could hack into Meridian's communications, look for anything connecting him to the kidnapping." "That's illegal," Jake pointed out. Elena shrugged. "So is kidnapping." Jake studied her face in the fading light. "You're not what I expected, Elena Morales." "What did you expect?" "Some ambitious city reporter who'd do anything for a story, no matter who got hurt." Elena smiled wryly. "That was me once, before I learned that the people behind the stories matter more than the stories themselves." Jake's gaze lingered on her face. "When did that change?" 3 years ago. I was investigating corruption in a children's charity. Got my big scoop, won an award, but the fallout shut down the charity entirely, even the legitimate parts that were helping kids." Eleanor's voice grew quiet. "I didn't consider the collateral damage. Since then, I've been more careful about how I pursue a story." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Rose chase fireflies. "We should contact Dominic Reeves," Elena said eventually. "The former security chief. He might have more information about what was happening within the Blackwood household before Sophia disappeared. Is he trustworthy?" "He seemed genuine when I interviewed him. Angry about being fired, but not vindictive. He genuinely cared about finding Sophia." Jake nodded slowly. "All right, but we do it carefully. No direct contact that could be traced. And we need a secure place to meet him." "I know a few tricks for arranging discreet meetings," Elena said. "Comes with the job." Jake turned to face her fully. "Elena, if this gets too dangerous, I want you to walk away. Take what you know to the authorities. Don't risk your life for this story." The concern in his eyes touched her. "It stopped being just a story the moment I met you and Rose," she admitted. "I'm in this until the end, whatever that looks like." Their eyes locked, and Elena felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or adrenaline. Here in this remote cabin, facing danger together, something was growing between them, a connection neither had anticipated. The moment was broken by Rose running up to the porch, her jar glowing with captured fireflies. "Look how many I got." Jake smiled, lifting the child onto his lap. "That's quite a collection, Rosie. But remember what we always say about wild things." Rose sighed dramatically. "They belong in nature, not in jars." "That's right. Why don't you let them go and make a wish?" As they fly away, Rose carefully opened the jar, watching with wonder as the fireflies dispersed into the night. "I wish we could stay here forever," she whispered. "Just the three of us." The innocent wish struck Elena's heart. In just a few days, she'd become attached to this unlikely father-daughter pair. The thought of separating them, even to return, Rose to her biological family, felt increasingly wrong. Later, after Rose was asleep, Eleanor and Jake sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, developing a plan. They would contact Dominic Reeves first, then Elena's cybersecurity contact. Meanwhile, they would stay at the cabin, moving only if absolutely necessary. "We should take turns keeping watch," Jake suggested, "just in case they somehow tracked us here." Elena nodded, stifling a yawn. The day's events had drained her completely. "You sleep first," Jake said, noticing her exhaustion. "I'll wake you in 4 hours." "Are you sure? You're the one who fought off kidnappers today." Jake smiled slightly. "Military training. I can function on minimal sleep when necessary." Eleanor hesitated, then impulsively reached out to touch the bruise on his face. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me with Rose, for not giving up." Jake caught her hand in his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Thank you for helping us, when you could have just written your story and moved on." Neither seemed willing to break the contact, their joined hands resting on the table between them. "Jake," Elena began, uncertain what she wanted to say, only knowing that something needed to be spoken. A noise outside made them both freeze. Jake was on his feet instantly, reaching for the hunting rifle he'd retrieved from the cabin's storage closet. "Stay with Rose?" he whispered, moving silently toward the window. Elena crept to the bedroom, positioning herself between the door and the sleeping child, her heart pounding. Minutes ticked by in tense silence. Then Jake returned, his expression grim. "Someone's out there," he confirmed. "Saw a flashlight between the trees. The men from this morning? Can't tell. But we're not waiting to find out." Jake moved quickly, gathering their few belongings. "There's an old ranger station about 2 miles deeper into the forest. We can reach it on foot through the woods where they can't follow with vehicles." "Walk through the forest at night? With Rose?" Elena questioned. "We don't have a choice," Jake said grimly. "If they found this cabin, it's not safe anymore." Elena nodded, trusting his judgment. "I'll get Rose ready." The child was disoriented and frightened when woken, but didn't cry or complain as they explained they needed to go on a night adventure. Jake carried her on his back, leading the way with a small flashlight that he kept mostly pointed at the ground to avoid detection. They moved slowly through the underbrush, every snapping twig and rustling leaf setting Elena's nerves on edge. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, Jake held up a hand, signaling them to stop. "Listen," he whispered. In the distance, Eleanor could hear men's voices and the sound of a vehicle's engine. "They're searching along the road," Jake murmured. "We need to go deeper into the woods." They changed direction, moving away from the sounds. Rose, who had been dozing against Jake's shoulder, suddenly stiffened. "Jake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know that voice." Jake and Elena exchanged alarmed glances. "Which voice, sweetheart?" Elena asked quietly. "The loud man. He's the one who took me from the garden. I remember his voice." Jake's expression hardened. "Can you still hear?" "Him, Rosie, what's he saying?" Rose concentrated, her small face serious in the dim light. "He's saying they need to find us before morning, before someone called Blackwood arrives." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Victor Blackwood is coming here." "Why?" "To tie up loose ends," Jake said grimly. "If Meridian is behind this, he doesn't want Blackwood to know he took Sophia. And if Blackwood is involved somehow, then neither of them wants the truth to come out," Eleanor finished. The implications were chilling. 2 powerful men, both potentially involved in a child's kidnapping, both willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their secrets. "We need to keep moving," Jake decided. "The ranger station has a radio. We can call for help." They continued. Through the dark forest, every step taking them further from safety and deeper into uncertainty. Rose began to whimper quietly, the fear and exhaustion finally overwhelming her brave facade. "It's okay, Rosie," Jake soothed. "Remember how we count stars when you're scared? Let's count trees instead. 1, 2, 3. Rose joined in shakily, the familiar counting exercise calming her. Elena marveled again at the bond between them, how this tough, solitary farmer had become such a natural father. A twig snapped nearby. They froze. "Down," Jake whispered urgently, dropping to a crouch with Rose still on his back. Elena followed suit, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain anyone nearby would hear it. A beam of light swept through the trees, passing just above their heads. Voices approached, two men speaking in low tones. "This is pointless," one complained. "They could be anywhere in these woods." "The boss wants the girl found tonight," the second replied. "And what the boss wants, the boss gets." "Which boss?" the first muttered. "Meridian or Blackwood? I'm getting tired of serving two masters." "Whichever one pays better," came the cynical response. "Right now, that's Blackwood. He's offering double if we find the girl before he arrives. Elena." And Jake exchanged significant looks. So Victor Blackwood was involved, but seemingly at odds with Meridian. What was really going on? The men moved on, their voices fading into the night. Jake signaled for them to remain still for several more minutes until he was certain the danger had passed. When they finally reached the ranger station, it was nearly dawn. The small wooden structure was even more basic than the cabin, just one room with a desk, chair, and radio equipment. Jake tried the radio immediately, but was met with only static. "Battery's dead," he said, frustration evident in his voice. Rose had finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep on a pile of old blankets in the corner. Elena sat beside Jake at the desk, both of them weary but too wired to rest. "We heard them mention both Meridian and Blackwood," Elena said quietly. "But it doesn't make sense. Why would Victor Blackwood be involved in his own daughter's kidnapping?" Jake rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe it wasn't about Sophia at all. Maybe it was about his wife. Isabel, the woman who had a breakdown after her daughter disappeared. Jake nodded slowly. "Think about it. The kidnappers said they were originally supposed to scare Blackwood, not take his daughter. What if Meridian intended to kidnap Sophia briefly, just long enough to frighten Blackwood into paying whatever debt he owed, but something went wrong? And now Blackwood is coming here to silence everyone involved, including his own daughter," Elena concluded, horror dawning. "Because if Rose remembers what happened and talks, then his involvement, whatever it was, comes to light." Jake finished. "And from what you've told me about him, Victor Blackwood's reputation is everything." Elena's journalistic mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of information they'd gathered. "We need proof, something concrete linking Blackwood to the kidnapping." "What we need right now is to get Rose somewhere truly safe," Jake countered. "Theories won't protect her from armed men." Elena knew he was right. Their priority had to be Rose's safety. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the full truth was just beyond their grasp, a truth that might be the only thing that could keep Rose safe in the long run. Outside, the first birds began their morning songs, the forest awakening around them. Despite the beauty of the sunrise filtering through the trees, Elena felt a growing sense of dread. Time was running out. Victor Blackwood was coming, and the fragile happiness she had witnessed between Jake and Rose, the family they had created, together, hung in the balance. Jake must have sensed her thoughts because he reached over and took her hand. Unlike the hesitant contact of the previous night, his grip was now firm and certain. "We'll protect her," he said simply. "Whatever it takes." Elena squeezed his hand in return. "Together," she agreed. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings. Then Jake leaned forward, his free hand gently touching her cheek. Elena's breath caught as his face moved closer to hers. Their lips had barely touched when a sound outside made them both tense. Car doors slamming, footsteps approaching, and then a commanding voice that made Rose stir and whimper in her sleep. "I know you're in there, Ms. Morales. I know you have my daughter. This ends now." Victor Blackwood had arrived. "Stay with Rose," Jake whispered to Elena, grabbing the hunting rifle. "If anything happens to me, run out the back window." Before Elena could protest, Jake moved to the door, weapon ready. He opened it to face the man who threatened everything he loved. Victor Blackwood stood on the rickety porch of the ranger station, flanked by two men in dark suits. In his early 50s, he had silver-streaked dark hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting his way. His expensive suit looked oddly out of place in the forest setting. "Mr. Harrison," Blackwood said smoothly. "I believe you have my daughter." "I don't know what you're talking about," Jake replied, keeping the rifle visible but not directly aimed. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not play games. The reporter has been asking questions all over town. We both know Sophia is here." Behind Jake, Elena had positioned herself in front of Rose, who was now awake and trembling. "That's him," Rose whispered. "The man who gave me the teddy bear with the camera inside." Elena frowned in confusion. "What teddy bear, Rose?" "The one the bad men gave me after they took me from the garden. They said it was from my daddy." A cold clarity washed over Eleanor. If Victor Blackwood had sent a teddy bear with a camera after the kidnapping, it meant he knew who had taken his daughter and was monitoring them. "Mr. Blackwood," Eleanor called out, making a split-second decision. "Why don't you come inside, alone? I think we all want the same thing, to keep Rose safe." Jake shot her a questioning look, but Elena gave him a subtle nod. She had a plan. After a tense moment, Blackwood nodded to his men to stay outside and stepped into the ranger station. His eyes immediately found Rose, and something flickered across his face, an emotion Eleanor couldn't quite read. "Sophia," he said softly. Rose pressed herself against Elena, refusing to look at him. "Her name is Rose now," Jake said firmly, "and she's terrified of you. Why is that, Mr. Blackwood?" Victor straightened his suit jacket, composure returning. "Children often misunderstand adult situations. Sophia was confused by what happened. I'm sure in her mind—" "Cut the act," Elena interrupted. "We know about Gabriel Meridian. We know about the teddy bear with the camera. We know this wasn't a simple kidnapping." For a moment, Blackwood's mask slipped, revealing surprise and calculation. Then he sighed and sat down on the room's only chair. "What do you think you know, Ms. Morales?" he asked. "I think Meridian kidnapped your daughter as revenge for what you did to his company," Eleanor said, watching him closely. "But I think you found out who took her, and instead of going to the police, you used it as an opportunity." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "An opportunity for what?" "To get rid of your wife," Jake said quietly, the pieces suddenly connecting. "The kidnappers said they were supposed to scare you, not take Sophia. But once she was gone, you saw a chance. To frame Isabel, didn't you?" Victor's cold laugh confirmed their suspicions. "Isabel was going to divorce me, take half my fortune, custody of Sophia, ruin everything I'd built. Her breakdown after Sophia disappeared was quite convenient. No judge would give custody to an unstable mother. You monster," Elena breathed. "Your own daughter." "I never intended for Sophia to be harmed," Victor snapped. "Meridian's men were supposed to return her after Isabel was committed, but they got greedy, demanded more money. Then they lost her." His voice hardened. "Do you have any idea what it's been like searching for 2 years, never knowing if she was alive or dead?" "So you've been looking for her all this time?" Jake asked skeptically. "Of course I have," Victor replied. "She's my daughter, my heir." "Not your daughter," Jake corrected. "Your possession. Something that belongs to you, like your company or your cars." Rose, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "You didn't come to find me. You sent the bad men." Victor's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "Sophia, sweetheart, I had to send people to look for you. There are bad people in the world." "You're the bad people," Rose said, her voice stronger than Elena had ever heard it. "You hurt Mommy. You told the men to take me." "That's not true," Victor said sharply. "Meridian took you to hurt me." "Then why did you send the teddy bear?" Eleanor asked. "Why were you monitoring the kidnappers instead of calling the police?" Victor's silence was damning. "Because he made a deal with them," came a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a tall, distinguished man with gray hair and tired eyes, accompanied by Sheriff Davis from Willow Creek. "Gabriel Meridian," Elena whispered. Meridian nodded. "Ms. Morales, your reputation for finding the truth is well deserved." He turned to Victor. "Hello, Victor. It's been a while." "What is he doing here?" Victor demanded, standing up. "Sheriff," Davis spoke up. "Mr. Meridian came to my office early this morning, told me a pretty incredible story about corporate espionage, kidnapping, and a little girl who might be Sophia Blackwood. It's true. Meridian said. I did plan to kidnap Sophia briefly, just enough to scare Victor into backing off his hostile takeover of my family's company. But when my men took her, Victor contacted me directly, said we could help each other. You're lying, Victor hissed. Am I? Meridian pulled out a phone and played a recording. Victor's voice filled the small room. Meridian, I know you have Sophia, but before you return her, I have a proposition. Keep her for 3 more days. Give me time to get Isabel committed. She's unstable, been threatening to take Sophia, and leave me. This solves both our problems. You get your revenge by hurting me publicly, and I get Isabel out of the picture. Rose began to cry softly. Jake moved to her side, putting a protective arm around her shoulders. So you recorded our conversation, Victor said, his voice deadly quiet. Insurance, Meridian replied. I never trusted you, but I agreed because it bought me time to try saving what was left of my company. I told my men to treat Sophia well. Then, why was she found alone, terrified, miles from anywhere? Jake demanded. Meridian's face showed genuine regret. My men panicked. One of them had a crisis of conscience about holding a child. They argued, and in the confusion, Sophia ran away. By the time they realized she was gone, they couldn't find her. We searched for weeks. So did I, Victor insisted. I've spent millions trying to find her. Yes, because once you realized I didn't have her anymore, you were afraid I'd go public with what you'd done, Meridian countered. You weren't looking for your daughter. You were looking for leverage against me. Sheriff Davis stepped forward. I've heard enough. Victor Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap, child endangerment, and a whole lot more charges once the FBI gets involved. Victor's face contorted with rage. You can't touch me. I have the best lawyers in the country. Maybe, the sheriff acknowledged, but that recording is pretty damning. And we have a witness. He nodded toward Rose. She's a child, Victor scoffed. Her testimony won't hold up. Maybe not, Elena said, pulling out her phone. But I've been recording this entire conversation. Between that and Meridian's evidence, I think you're finished, Mr. Blackwood. As the sheriff handcuffed Victor, Rose buried her face against Jake's chest. Outside, they could hear the Blackwood security men being detained by the sheriff's deputies who had accompanied them. What about Sophia's mother? Jake asked. Isabel Blackwood? Meridian answered. She's in a private mental health facility in Switzerland. Victor made sure she was heavily medicated and kept away from the press. Can she recover? Elena asked. With proper care, yes, Meridian replied. When I realized the full extent of what Victor had done, I began paying for her. Through treatment, under a different name. She's been improving steadily for the past year. You did that for her? Jake asked, surprised. Meridian looked ashamed. It was the least I could do after my part in all this. I never meant for a child to be hurt or a mother to be separated from her daughter. I just wanted justice for my company, my employees. He turned to Rose. I'm so sorry, Sophia. What I did was wrong, and you paid the price. Rose looked at him with solemn eyes, but said nothing. As Sheriff Davis led Victor away, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Rose was indeed Sophia Blackwood. She had a mother who loved her and was recovering, waiting to reunite with her daughter, which meant Jake would lose her. The thought must have shown on his face because Eleanor reached for his hand, squeezing it supportively. And what happens now? Jake asked, his voice rough with emotion. Legally, custody would revert to Isabel Blackwood once she's deemed stable, Sheriff Davis said. Until then, the courts will decide temporary arrangements. I'd like to speak with Ms. Blackwood, Jake said. Before any decisions are made, Rose Sophia has been through enough trauma. Whatever happens next needs to be what's best for her. Meridian nodded. I can arrange that. Isabel is a good woman. She'll want what's best for her daughter, too. 3 weeks later, Eleanor sat on Jake's porch swing, watching him work in the garden below. The aftermath of their ordeal had been a whirlwind of legal statements, news coverage, and adjustments. Victor Blackwood was awaiting trial, his empire crumbling as investors fled the scandal. Gabriel Meridian had made a deal with prosecutors, trading his testimony for immunity. And Isabel Blackwood had returned to the United States, determined to reunite with the daughter she'd thought was lost forever. The reunion had been tearful and hesitant. Rose. Now, officially Sophia again, had only faint memories of her mother. But Isabel had been patient and understanding, spending hours with her daughter at Jake's farm, getting to know the little girl she'd become. What had surprised everyone was Isabel's decision not to immediately take Sophia back to their old life. She needs stability, Isabel had told Jake during one of their many conversations. She loves this farm. She loves you. I won't tear her away from another home. Instead, Isabel had rented a cottage in Willow Creek, just a 10-minute drive from Jake's farm. Sophia split her time between them, an arrangement that would continue until they decided on something more permanent. Penny for your thoughts, Jake said, climbing the porch steps and sitting beside Elena. Just thinking about how different everything is now, she replied. A month ago, you were a reclusive farmer, and I was a reporter chasing a story. Jake chuckled. And now? Now I'm a reporter who got an exclusive on the biggest story of the year, Elena said with a smile. But somewhere along the way, the story stopped being the most important thing. Jake took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. What became the most important thing? Elena met his gaze. You. Sophia. This place. Everything I didn't know I was looking for. After the danger had passed, Eleanor had returned to the city to file her story and face her editor. But Willow Creek and its inhabitants had pulled her back. She'd taken a leave of absence, renting a small apartment in town while she figured out what came next. Have you made a decision about the job in Washington? Jake asked. Elena had been offered a prestigious position at a national news outlet, the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about for years. I turned it down, she said. It didn't feel right anymore. Jake's eyebrows rose. Elena, that was your dream job. Dreams change, she said simply. I've been talking with Gabriel Meridian, actually. He's starting a new venture, an independent news site focused on corporate accountability. He's offered me a position as lead investigative reporter. That sounds perfect for you. The best part is I can work from anywhere, Elena continued, watching his reaction carefully, including a small farming town in the middle of nowhere. Hope flickered in Jake's eyes. You'd stay in Willow Creek? If I had a reason to, she replied. Softly. Jake's arm went around her shoulders, pulling her closer. I can think of at least one reason. Just one, Elena teased. Well, there's Sophia, Jake said, his voice growing serious. She asks about you every day when she's here, and Isabel thinks you're a good influence. I'm glad to hear that, Elena said. I've grown pretty attached to her too. And then there's this, Jake continued, turning to face her fully. I love you, Elena Morales. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but these past weeks have been the most intense of my life. I've seen you brave and determined and compassionate. I've seen how much you care about Sophia, and I don't want to imagine my life without you in it. Elena's heart swelled. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the fading bruise on his cheekbone. I love you too, Jake Harrison. Enough to trade city life for small-town farming. Their lips met in a kiss that had been building since that first interrupted moment in the cabin. When they finally parted, Jake rested his forehead against hers. So what happens now, he asked. Now we take it one day at a time, Elena replied. Build something real, something that works for all of us. You, me, Sophia, Isabel. An unconventional family, Jake mused. The best kind, Elena agreed, built on choice rather than obligation. The sound of a car approaching made them both look up. Isabel's silver sedan came into view, with Sophia waving excitedly from the passenger seat. As the car parked, Sophia bounded out, racing toward Ubi, the porch. Jake, Elena, Mom let me help bake cookies and we brought some for you. Isabel followed more slowly, a container in her hands and a tentative smile on her face. The elegant blonde woman had changed profoundly from the society photos Elena had seen. She was simpler now, more genuine, her focus entirely on rebuilding her relationship with her daughter. I hope we're not interrupting, Isabel said. Never, Jake assured her, standing to greet them. You're always welcome. Here, Sophia grabbed Elena's hand. Come see what Mum and I made. They're shaped like farm animals. As Elena allowed herself to be pulled toward the kitchen, she caught Jake and Isabel exchanging a warm look of mutual respect. They had come so far from the potential custody battle that might have been. Instead, they were creating something new, a family defined not by blood or legal documents, but by love and shared purpose. Later that evening, after Isabel and Sophia had gone home, Jake and Elena walked hand in hand through the farm's fields, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I almost lost this place," Jake said, surveying his land. "After everything happened, all the press coverage, I thought about selling. Starting fresh somewhere else. What changed your mind?" Elena asked. "Sophia," he answered simply. "When she found out, she cried for hours, said this was her home, the place she felt safe. And I realized she was right. This land isn't just soil and crops. It's memories and security and future possibilities." Elena squeezed his hand. "Speaking of possibilities, Isabel mentioned something interesting today. She's considering buying the old Wilson property that borders your land." Jake looked surprised. "Really? Why?" "She wants to start a riding therapy program for traumatized children," Elena explained. "She said going through this with Sophia made her realize how many children need healing spaces." "That's actually amazing," Jake said thoughtfully. "The Wilson place would be perfect for that. Good pastures, that big old barn. And it would mean Sophia could be connected to both her homes," Elena pointed out. "The farm she loves and a new project with her mother." Jake nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "One big extended family, right here in Willow Creek. Who would have thought?" Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder as they watched the sunset. "Sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to exactly where you're meant to be." 6 months later, the Harrison farm hosted a small, intimate wedding. Sophia, wearing a flower crown of roses she had helped grow, served as flower girl. Isabel, now a close friend to both bride and groom, sat in the front row dabbing at tears as Jake and Elena exchanged vows beneath an arch of sunflowers and wild blooms. Sheriff Davis was there, along with Martha the housekeeper and other townspeople, who had become like family. Even Gabriel Meridian attended, his redemption story having become part of the larger narrative Elena had written, a story of mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. As Jake slipped a simple gold band onto Elena's finger, she thought about the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together. A lost little girl, a determined investigation, a fight for truth and safety. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said, beaming at the couple, as they sealed their vows. With a kiss, cheers erupted from the gathered guests. Sophia bounced excitedly, tossing rose petals into the air. The reception was held in the big barn, decorated with twinkling lights and wildflowers. As twilight fell, Jake pulled Elena onto the makeshift dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. "Completely," she replied, melting into his embrace, "though I'm still not sure I'll ever be a proper farmer's wife." Jake laughed. "You'll never be proper anything, Elena. That's what I love about you." Across the room, Sophia was teaching Isabel a clapping game she'd learned at school, both of them laughing. The sight warmed Elena's heart. Their unusual family arrangement was working better than anyone could have predicted. Sophia spent weekdays with Isabel at the riding center they were developing, and weekends at the farm with Jake and Elena. They shared holidays, celebrated milestones together, and focused on giving Sophia the security and love she needed. "You, sir?" "No," Jake said, following her gaze. "A year ago I thought my life was complete. I had my farm, my success. I didn't know what I was missing." "And now?" Elena asked. Jake drew her closer, his eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above them. "Now I have everything. A daughter to love, even if I share her. A wife who challenges me every day. And a future filled with possibilities I never dared to imagine." As the music swelled around them, Elena knew that this moment, this man, this unconventional family they had created was her true story. Not the headlines or the accolades, but the quiet triumph of love overcoming all obstacles. Sometimes the heart finds its home in the most unexpected places. For Elena, that place was here, dancing in a barn with a millionaire farmer who had adopted a lost little girl, never expecting who she really was or how she would change all their lives forever. "I love you, Jake Harrison," she whispered. "And I love you, Eleanor Harrison," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss as they danced beneath the stars, surrounded by the family they had fought so hard to build and protect. The end.